What's up, Dragon Brood? Today, there was a pile, and I mean pile, of Thunder Junction stuff that got previewed for day one. And it's going to be coming pretty quick over the next week, so I'm going to see how many of these videos I get done. But let's hop in and look at some of the cards from that set, and let's just give our first opinion, feelings, whatever, after looking at them. All right, so this one's the Great Train Heist, which I love that we're going to get a lot of these tropes, because, train heists were a thing that you see in all these old Western movies. Now, this is a card that has Spree, and if you notice in the upper right-hand corner there, there's a mana symbol and a plus sign. So it costs 1 plus whatever else you want to spend. So it's an instant, and Spree says you can choose 1 or more. So you can get plus 2 and a red, so 4 mana. You can untap all the creatures you control. If it's untap all creatures you control. If it's your combat phase, there's an additional combat phase after this. So you can get another attack step, basically. Or you can just pay just 2 colorless. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain first strike till end of turn. Or you can just pay 1 additional and you choose an opponent. Whenever a creature you control does combat to that player, create a tapped treasure token. So this is cool because it can go into a lot of different decks, right? If you have something that cares about artifacts or cares about treasure, then for 2 mana, you deal damage to your opponent, you make some treasures, right? For 3 mana, you can just pump your team, so it functions as a way to just get a little bit of extra damage or an attack step, or you can pay 4 and just get a whole new attack step. And you could draw this late and get all those abilities, which is pretty sweet. So I don't know how good each of these is going to be, but we'll see if there's any other Spree cards that got previewed today. All right, unfortunate accident. Well, here's another Spree card. It's a black plus. It's also an instant. I guess we're going to have each of these in each color that's 1 plus something. So for 3 extra mana, you can destroy a creature. So for 4 mana, you can destroy a creature. For 2 mana, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with tap. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 to end of turn. Only activate this as a sorcery. Okay, so this is probably going to be a thing that's on mercenaries. Interesting that this one only has 2 choices, where the other one had 3. But the other one was a rare, so maybe the uncommon ones only get 2 choices, the rare ones get 3 or 4 choices. This is okay, but not something I'd say is great. I mean, getting another 1/1 is fine. You get to pump a creature, and that's kind of cool. In a pinch, you can kill something, but the upside of, for 5 mana, you could kill a thing and make a 1/1 is actually kind of okay. So it's weird. It's not as efficient as the other removal cards, but it gives you flexibility and more things you could do with your mana late in the game. So it is possible this card could see some play. Tiny Bones. We saw that Tiny Bones was going to be brought back. Oh no, this is actually Tiny Bones joins up, so it's not even a Tiny Bones card. It's 1 black for a legendary enchantment. Whenever this card enters the battlefield, any number of target players each discards a card. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, any number of target players each mill a card and lose a life. This is kind of interesting, right? If you're playing discard or a mill deck, say in Commander, this is actually pretty sweet. It's kind of an easy addition for those decks that already play a lot of legendary creatures, which is kind of awesome. In standard type play, which is what we focus on a lot on the channel, not so much. It's like, yeah, all right, you get your opponent to discard a card. However, I will say, the premise of the set sounds like there's going to be a lot of legendary creatures. And if there are, then maybe this is a little bit of something. It's a mill card, it's a drain card. It's kind of cool. I don't know how much I'm excited about it, but it is one you could probably include in a couple different interesting builds. All right, Rattleback Apothecary. This is a 3 mana 3/2 with Death Touch. It's a Gorgon, which is cool, and a Warlock. Crazy cool art. I don't know who did this. This is an artist I'm not familiar with. But whenever you commit a crime, which I have to say, that phrase really bugs me, but that's a whole different thing. Target creature you control gains your choice of menace or lifelink until end of turn. This is kind of cool. So a crime is defined by if you target anything a player controls, including their spells on the stack. So you can counter something or whatever. But if you, in some way, targeted something on your opponent's side, then you get to give something either menace or lifelink. And that kind of makes this card a little better than it needs to be, because what's funny is it sounds like you can target them with anything. So even if you have something that says, like, you can give a +1/+1 to a target creature, or whatever the case may be, that counts? Like, so you remove something from their graveyard, that counts? Yeah, maybe this card could get play. I mean, it's a 3/2, and we have so many good things you can already do with 3 mana, so it probably doesn't realistically. But if there is something that cares about Gorgons or Warlocks, that's probably where this ends up. Shame though, because that's a cool piece of art. Be unfortunate if it didn't get played. Shame though, it's a cool piece of art. It would be unfortunate if it didn't get played. All right, we have Rakish Crew, 3 colorless enchantment. When Rakish Crew enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 red mercenary token, tap, creature gets +1, only activated as sorcery. Whenever an outlaw, oh, it's funny, I just realized that's this target creature you control gets, so it's keeping you from being able to get the crime credits by targeting an opponent's thing. Whenever an outlaw you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Outlaws are defined as assassins, mercenaries, pirates, rogues, or warlocks. Those are all outlaws. You know, this card probably gets played, especially in multiples. If this hits, it's pretty rough. And each one is also making a mercenary, so when that dies, even if you're just chump blocking, that's going to drain your opponent's life total. So yeah, this is one that I think if you build around it, it probably has some options. Just on its face, though, not the greatest thing. All right, we have Gissa the Hellraiser, 3 colorless, black for a 4/4 legendary creature, human warlock, has ward 2 and pay 2 life. Wow, so the ward is you have to pay 2 colorless and 2 life. That's crazy. All right, skeletons and zombies you control get +1/+1 and have menace. Whenever you commit a crime, you create two tapped 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature tokens. This ability triggers only once each turn. I like this card, and I'm going to tell you why. Like, we've needed some things. It sounds crazy, but for the skeleton creature type, because we have like 3 cards that are reasonable skeletons or make skeletons, and kind of not much else in standard right now. And this fits that pretty well. Now, could you do something with like skeletons and zombies and fill in some of those slots? Possibly. But this is at least a cool build around card that exists. And I like the fact that it's a Lord effect to pump up your other creatures that is hard to remove. The opponent has to pay extra mana and extra life, which I love. Slickshot Lockpicker. It's a 3 mana, 2/3 human rogue. When Slickshot Lockpicker enters the battlefield, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. And then it has another ability of plot, pay 2 and a blue. You can pay this cost and exile this card from your hand, cast it as a sorcery on a later turn without paying its mana cost. Plot only as a sorcery. So this is actually pretty interesting. One, giving something in your yard flashback is always something you kind of keep on top of your mind. We like those type of effects. This is a little bit pricey for it, but could work in a variety of things. But the plot cost here is interesting. So you could pay the 3 now. It can only plot as a sorcery, so it has to be on your turn. So you pay it, you set the card aside, and then it just says cast as a sorcery on a later turn. So you can almost pay the 3, and then kind of, all right, wait till late in the game, have something in your graveyard you want to make a copy of. Maybe it's a kill spell or something, right? So you kill something and then you get to play the lockpicker and kill something else. And this isn't bad if you're playing something like sweepers of some kind. So you kind of set this off to the side. So after the sweeper, now you have time to like play a thing, maybe draw some extra cards or whatever the case may be. It's actually pretty cool. I don't know if it'll get played. The cost is a little bit clunky, but I do like what they're doing with this whole thing. Plan the Heist. 2 colorless, blue for sorcery. Surveil 3. If you have no cards in hand, then draw 3 cards. Okay, so you're drawing 3 as a sorcery. But if you don't have any cards in hand, you get to surveil 3, then draw 3. This is also plot 3 colorless and a blue. You may not want to just do it to draw 3, but if you could surveil 3, draw 3, maybe that's pretty good. And the cost is a little easier, being 3 colorless and a blue as opposed to just being 2 blue. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but it does make it to where some decks could probably take more advantage of it, possibly. So yeah, this one's actually pretty cool. I don't have a problem with it. I don't know. I think if there is an issue with this card, it's that we have other things like Deluge and some of these other cards that already let you look at the top 4 or top 6 or top 7, put some number of them in your hand, and those are instant speed. So I don't know if this card really gets played, unfortunately, but it's not a bad card. All right, we have Key to the Vault. It's a legendary artifact equipment. Whenever an equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, look at that many cards on the top of your library. You may exile a non-land card from among them, put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. You may cast the exile card without paying its cost. Wow, all right, so you just equip this for 3. It goes on a creature. Whenever they deal damage, you look at that many cards equal to the damage, and you just get to play a non-land card. This is pretty good. I mean, like, here's the thing though. It doesn't do much on its own. It's also not increasing the power of the thing you put it on. An equip cost of 3 is not nothing, right? You have to make a commitment, and there may be a chance where you try to pay 3 and then they just kill your creature and you spent your whole turn, right? It's a powerful upside, but it does come with significant risk. Probably right now, off the top of my head, it probably gets played in just artifact heavy decks already. We'll see if there's a home somewhere else. I'm not excited about this one yet, but the upside is pretty high. I wasn't going to cover too many of the comments today, but this one, because it has a keyword on it, I do want to talk about it. It is trained Aronix. Aronix? Arinx? Trained Arinx. I'm going to go with that. Colorless and a white for a 3/1. Cat Beast Mount, which is pretty crazy. Whenever trained Arinx. There we go. That's what we're deciding on. When trained Arinx attacks while saddled, it gains first strike until end of turn, scry 1. And you saddle this for 2. You can tap any number of other creatures you control with power 2 or more. This mount becomes saddled until the end of your turn. This basically works like a vehicle, right? It has a saddle number. You have to tap some number of creatures with that much power. The difference, though, is you can only saddle as a sorcery, which is a little weird since you have to make a commitment of another creature, which doesn't feel great, but as a sorcery. And then this card gains first strike on the turn, and you get to scry. So that's actually pretty good. But yeah, I don't know. This seems fine. It's a common. I don't expect a lot out of it. But saddle being restricted to being a sorcery is a downside. All right, Frontier Seeker. This is a 2 mana, 2/1 human scout. When Frontier Seeker enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You can reveal a mount creature card or a plains card from among them, put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is okay. I mean, if you're playing mounts, obviously this card has more upside. Otherwise, it's just like put a plains into your hand. It's a 2 mana, 2/1. Mono white or the white aggro decks of different varieties have so many good things you can play for 2 mana already. This probably doesn't see a lot of play outside of something that's saddle heavy. All right, Final Showdown. This is another one of those sprees. And again, it's a white plus. You can +1 colorless. All creatures lose all abilities until end of turn. You can +1 colorless. Choose a creature you control. It gains indestructible to end of turn, which is kind of cool. And you can +5, so 3 white, white, destroy all creatures. First things first, because I got to say it. Can we go one set without a sweeper? I mean, seriously. Each of the last, I don't know, like 6, 7, 8 sets have all had like 2 decent quality playable ones and like 4 or 5 other mid-level ones. But anyway, here's another one. Now, granted, this one at least cost you a minimum of 6, so there's that. But if you're willing to pay 7, you can protect one of your creatures and destroy everything else. And that's pretty damn good. Or you can just turn some creature abilities off. Maybe you don't want them to trigger when they deal damage to you. Or, something comes into play and they gain whatever those abilities are, right? You can just turn all that off at instant speed, which is pretty damn good for 2 mana. So, interesting card even when you're not using it as a sweeper. Intimidation Campaign, colorless, blue, black, enchantment. When Intimidation Campaign enters the battlefield, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life, and you draw a card. Whenever you commit a crime, you may return this card to its owner's hand. This is interesting. This is where, it's hard to evaluate cards with new mechanics. But I think in general, if you are playing some type of mid-rangey or control type deck that's going to be trying to spot kill a bunch of creatures or whatever, this isn't bad. You drain your opponent for 1, you get a card. Then you kill something, you get to return to your hand, get another life and a card. I could see decks playing like 2 copies of this just for value. This is kind of cool. Yeah, not much else to say about this one. All right, they said we're going to get 1 Planeswalker per set for a while. So here's Jace Reawakened, 2 blue, first off. So 2 mana on a Planeswalker already makes you want to question how good or bad it is. You can't play this spell during your first, second, or third turn of the game. Well, that makes sense. So you can't play it right off the bat. +1, draw a card, discard a card. +1, you can exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your hand. If you do, it becomes plotted, so you can set it aside for later. Or you can -6 until end of turn. Whenever you cast a spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. If plot is a thing, this card's obviously solid. If it's not a thing, drawing and discarding so you get your loot effect, that's fine. The last ability is kind of cool, but you'd have to already have a bunch of stuff plotted to take advantage of it, I would think. So yeah, I don't know. while the art might be awesome, I don't know how good this is yet. I'm going to probably need somebody else to figure this one out before I do. All right, and some of these were international release previews, so I'm going to have to give you the translation. But this is Salvala, who has two other versions on cards in Magic, I believe. Salvala Eager Trailblazer, two colorless, green white. It's a legendary creature, Elf Scout, with Vigilance. It's a 4/5, which is nice for 4 mana. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 red mercenary token that taps, creature gets +1 as a sorcery. Already good. Choose a color. Oh, you tap, choose a color. Add 1 mana of that color for each different power among creatures you control. Wow, there's a lot going on with this card. All right, so for 4 mana, you get a 4/5 vigilance creature, which is already solid. Then you get to tap it for at least, I'm assuming, 2+ mana most of the time. And if you play a creature, you just get to make a random 1/1 mercenary just because. I'm into this card. I say that. The problem is, like, where does this card fit, right? Are we playing green, white, just straight up aggro, whatever? We're playing some type of Naya build. It's an elf, and we don't have that many quality elves, so like that's a thing. It could go into an elf deck. That's possible if there's other elves in the set. Yeah, this card, I just got to figure out where it goes. This kind of reminds me of Trostani from Karlov Manor, where you read it and the stats make sense and it's really good, but I've only been able to get it into a couple of decks so far. So this might be something similar, but it's at least impressive and at least makes me think about it. Lava Spur Boots. So 1 mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has haste and ward 1 and equips for 1. This is just kind of decent. I like it for limited play. It's kind of cool. For constructed, don't know, but giving every creature haste is actually pretty cool, especially like after a sweeper. That's pretty hot. There's things that already care about you having haste. This could fit perfectly into those. And it is an extra +1 with ward, so it does kind of protect the thing too. So yeah, it's kind of a cute card. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's not bad. This doesn't have a clean translation for the name, but it is another spree card and uncommon, so it only has 2 choices. So it's 1+1 colorless. Exile target non-token creature. At the beginning of the next end step, return to the battlefield under its owner's control. So a blink effect, that's pretty cool. Or +2 colorless. Choose target creature. If there are no other creatures with greater power than it is destroyed. So if you're playing it as a blink effect, cool. I guess if it's the only creature, you'd be able to kill it. Yeah, as the removal side, I like this so far of the spree cards is probably my least favorite. It's not trash, but definitely not as good as the others. Not for me. All right, there's another one we don't have a clean translation for, but it is 3 colorless, black-green sorcery. Return up to 1 target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Return up to 1 target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Oh, this is nice. There's always been a reanimator. I feel like we get one kind of every set or every other set. But so this one for 5 mana lets you take any creature in your graveyard, put it on the battlefield. And then you can take any permanent, which could be artifacts, enchantments, whatever, even a land, I guess, and return it from your graveyard to your hand. I like the flexibility of this one. Right? It's a different way to play reanimator type effects, and the fact that you kind of get extra value out of it, other than just getting the creature you're targeting, is pretty cool. Again, don't know how much can get played because we have like I think 4 other quality ways to reanimate things right now. 5 because we got one last set too, I think. Overall, it's a neat card. The translated name here is Unreal Estate, which is kind of funny. Colorless and a blue, it's an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, if you haven't cast a spell from your hand this turn, and this isn't a creature, it becomes a 3/3 spirit creature with flying, in addition to its other types. So for 2 mana, you can next turn just not cast anything, and then it becomes a 3/3 spirit with flying, and then you can pay 2 colorless and a blue to surveil 1. This card's actually kind of sweet. Like, just getting to surveil for free every turn is pretty cool, especially if you're trying to like build up your graveyard or you just want to like smooth out your draws. But then if you're playing something kind of mid-rangey, control-y, whatever, or maybe even a spirit stack, if you just take a turn where you don't cast anything, well, now you have a 3/3 you can fight with. This is kind of a cool card. I don't know what to do with it, but I like what it's doing. All right, and this is one that was previewed previously, but it is a Duelist of the Mind, a colorless and a blue, for an X3 human advisor. Flying, vigilance, Duelist of the Mind's power is equal to the number of cards you've drawn this turn. Whenever you commit a crime, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. This ability only triggers once each turn. So this is kind of cool. Like, it's a 2 mana 0/3 basically, but it does have flying and vigilance. So if you have any way to draw cards and it's in speed, you can attack with it, you can block with it, you can filter your hand by countering things even. So yeah, all around, this is kind of a cool card. It might get more play in some older formats, but this might have a little bit of room in standard, especially in the decks that are already playing stuff like the Haughty Jin type decks, right? That are already playing a ton of spells and drawing cards. We have Tiny Bones the Pickpocket. 1 black for a 1/1 Death Touch. Whenever Tiny Bones the Pickpocket deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target non-land permanent card from that player's graveyard. And, and mana of any type can be spent to cast their spell. This is a weird one, right? Because 1/1s with Death Touch, you're like, oh, your opponent never wants to block it or whatever. But because they don't want you to play stuff out of the graveyard, they're definitely going to block it. So this just gets to kill something. In the current standard, probably many times it's going to get blocked by a 1/1 or 2/2 or some 2/1 creature. So not the most devastating thing. But as a sideboard card in some older formats where they're not playing a bunch of blockers, this does become kind of a cheap card that can actually do some things. So yeah, I'm into it, but not necessarily for standard. I will say this though, it is a skeleton, and it gives you another quality 1-drop, so if you are building the skeleton deck, this might have a home. I forgot there was actually another Planeswalker in this set, but Oko the Ringleader, 2 colorless, blue-green. It has at the beginning of combat on your turn, Oko becomes a copy of up to 1 target creature you control till end of turn, except that it has hexproof. And then you can pay 1, draw 2 cards. If you've committed a crime this turn, you discard a card, otherwise you discard 2 cards. So it's draw 2, discard 2. If you've targeted something of your opponent's during the turn, you only have to discard 1. And then you -1, create a 3/3 green elk because Oko likes making elks for some reason. And then for each other non-land permanent you control, you can -5 and create a token that's a copy of that permanent type. So this is actually pretty cool. And it doesn't even say non-token permanent you control, it's just for each other non-land permanent. So you could plus, and then copy all the other creatures or whatever you have, or permanents. It doesn't even have to be creatures. This actually feels pretty strong for a 4-mana Planeswalker. It doesn't start out with a lot of loyalty, so it can be dealt with, and then every turn it also becomes a creature with hexproof, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, lots going on with this card, and I'm sure it's probably going to show up in 3 or 4 different types of decks. We have a Hell to Pay. X and a red, sorcery. Hell to Pay deals X damage to target creature. Create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to the amount of excess damage dealt to a creature this way. This is interesting, right? Because you can use it early. It's just like, all right, I need to deal 2 or 3 to something. But if your opponent just has like a 2/2 you don't like, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to deal 4 and I'm going to get 2 treasure. It's neat. I don't know if it's any better than any other removal. Kind of cool, I guess. I don't know how much I would play of it, but it's an interesting card nonetheless. And we have Fibblethip, Lost on the Range, colorless blue for a legendary homunculus 1/1. It does have ward 2, so he is very hard to kill. Look at the top card of your library at any time. The top card of your library has plot, so you could pay its cost and stuff to the side. The plot cost is equal to its mana cost. You may plot non-land cards from the top of your library, which is also pretty cool. So yeah, so Fibblethip, if you're doing the plot thing, obviously a card that fits. Otherwise, it's a little bit gimmicky, a lot to pay for a 1/1, but it's a cool card. Well, it looks like more things got added while I was making the video, so I'm just going to keep going. Vial Smasher, Lethal Grenadier. It's a red-black 3/2 mercenary goblin legendary. Whenever another outlaw enters the battlefield under your control, Vial Smasher deals 1 damage to target opponent. Yeah, if you're doing the outlaw deck, this makes a lot of sense, right? It's a 2-mana 3/2. Something comes into play, it deals damage. I mean, hard to argue with that. I mean, you can even pair this with something, depending on the colors, if you want to play Mardu, with something like War Leader's Call, and now everything coming into play deals 2 damage. Yeah, this seems fine. Like, kind of cool, really. Vraska, the Silencer, colorless, black-green for a 3/3 Gorgon Assassin. So if you're doing more assassin stuff, here's an option. If you're looking for Gorgon stuff, here's an option. It is Death Touch. Whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you may pay 1 colorless. If you do, return that card to the battlefield tapped under your control. But it's a treasure artifact with tap, sacrifice, add 1 mana of any color, loses all other card types. So if you want to keep stuff out of your opponent's graveyard, this is a good thing. But otherwise, you're just using them to ramp up your mana. And a 3/3 with that touch isn't nothing, right? This is a real card. And again, it could be a reasonable assassin to help out those Atrata decks, possibly. Bovine Intervention, colorless and a white. For an instant, destroy target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 2/2 white ox creature token. I don't have a problem with this. This is just solid, destroy a creature or an artifact, so more limited than something like Get Lost, but you are replacing it with a 2/2 ox instead, whereas Get Lost or a card like it was giving you like treasures or whatever. So yeah, this is just a good quality card. I don't know if it gets played over other stuff that exists because of the lack of versatility, but this does kill artifacts where something like Get Lost doesn't, so maybe there's room for both? Who knows? Rakdos, the Muscle, 2 colorless, black, black, red for a 6/5 Demon Mercenary Legend. So he has flying and trample, so he's got the famous flample, if you will. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile cards equal to its mana value from the top of target player's library. Until your end step, you may play those cards, and mana of any type can be used to cast those spells. So they're not free, you have to pay for them. Sacrifice another creature. Rakdos, the Muscle, gains indestructible turn to turn. Tap it, activate only once each turn. You can sacrifice another creature to tap Rakdos, make it indestructible. And then whenever you sacrifice a thing, you get to look at the top cards of any player's library, it looks like. Top cards, of target player's library. And then you can play those cards with whatever mana you have if you want to. It's a neat card. I just don't know where this fits right now, right? There are some sacrifice decks that might want something like this. So maybe, because those decks don't really have a top end, so maybe 2 copies fit into something like that. But I don't think this is a card that we're just going to see a lot of. I think you almost need a specialized deck. Otherwise, you're just playing a big 6/5 with Flample, and there's probably other choices we could go with if we want to do that. Right, we got Ruthless Lawbringer, colorless, white-black, 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, destroy target non-land permanent. It's a vampire, it's an assassin. Yeah, this is fine. It's a 3-mana, 3/2, so it's not going to blow anybody's doors off. You have to sacrifice another creature. You can't sacrifice itself, but you do get to destroy any non-land permanent, so that's kind of cool. It's at least flexible. It's a vampire. It could fit some of those builds. It's an assassin. It could fit some different builds. So yeah, it's fine. It might show up here and there. I just don't know how much. Marauding Sphinx. 3 colorless, blue, 3/5 Sphinx Rogue. That's cool. It has flying. It has vigilance. It has ward 2. So you get a lot for your 5 mana. Whenever you commit a crime, you get to surveil 2. This ability triggers only once each turn. So if you copy something, you get to surveil 2. If you bounce something, you get to surveil 2. If you just kill your opponent's stuff, you get to surveil things. Like that. This is cool. I don't know how much this is going to get played, but for an uncommon, there's a lot going on these stats for 5 mana. We got another Lazav, Familiar Stranger, colorless, blue-black, 1/4 shapeshifter. Whenever you commit a crime, put a +1/+1 counter on Lazav. Then you may exile a card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, you may have Lazav become a copy of that until end of turn. The ability only triggers once each turn. So you can only put a counter on it once a turn. When you do, you can copy a creature from a graveyard base. Well, you can remove a card from any graveyard, and then you can have it copy a creature if it was a creature you removed. Yeah, this is neat. I don't know how much is going to get played. I think Lazavs are always kind of gimmicky. You can probably build around them in Commander to take advantage of it, but that's probably like the best we can say for cards like this. Make Your Own Luck, 3 colorless, green-blue, sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may exile a non-land card from among them. If you do, it becomes plotted. Oh, that's cool, so it automatically becomes plotted. Put the rest into your hand. You may cast that card as sorcery later on a later turn without paying its mana cost. So the interesting thing here is, you look at 3, you set 1 aside, but you still can't get the benefit of it for another turn at a minimum. But if you ramp into this and you play it on turn 3 or 4, maybe there's some extra benefit. You still, man, this is interesting. Because it can also let you get a card that's above what the mana you have, right? This costs 5, but it lets you put any card and just plot it. So then you can just cast it later. I mean, this could let you get a really big creature now that I'm thinking about it. Like for 5 mana, you can go get something cost 7, 8, 10, whatever. This card might go hard in a couple of decks. Seriously. We have Crom, Violent Cacophony, 2 colorless, red blue, 2/3 zombie horror with flying. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this card and draw a card. Now, see, this is starting to fill in some of the gaps that these is it draw cards decks, play spells decks really want. But being able to play your second thing and then replace a card and make a creature bigger permanently is actually kind of cool. I'm into this a little bit. I don't know if it fits totally where we want it to just yet, but it's a cool card. Right, we got yet another Kellens. This is Kellen the Kid. It's a green, white, blue, human fairy rogue, so we're going to fit a couple of different decks. Still legendary, 3/3, flying, lifelink. A lot for 3 mana. It's 3 different colors, but 3/3 flying lifelink. Plus, whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, which could be plotted cards, you may cast a permanent spell with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its cost. If you don't, you put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So if you have something else to play, like you play something from somewhere that's not in your hand, you get to play something of equal or lesser value for free from your hand. But if you don't, you could just put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. A lot of nice words, doesn't mean anything if you don't have cards in your hand that you can play. But all around, it might just be a quality card. I mean, lifelink flyer for 3 mana, the 3/3. Maybe there's something you could do with this. Not sure. I have played some Bant Humans decks, so possibly it could be a thing. Jolene, Plundering Pugilist, colorless, red green, 4/2, human mercenary. So another human, 4/2 for 3. Whenever you attack with one or more creatures with power 4 or greater, create a treasure. So this just attacks and makes a treasure on its own. And then you can pay 1 and a red, sacrifice a treasure. This deals 1 damage to any target. If you're playing a deck that already can generate a lot of treasure or cares about treasure, then yeah, this could be a thing. Otherwise, not much going on. Though it does have a crazy snake horse in this thing, which is pretty wild in the artwork. But beyond that, it's fine. I don't know how excited I am about it, but it's interesting at least. Honest Rutstein. Of all the legends I expected to see in this set, this was not it. But hey, colorless, black, green, 3/2, human warlock legend. When Honest Rutstein enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Creature spells cost 1 less to cast. Alright, so reducing all your creature spells is nice. It's a 3/2 for 3. Yeah, this is just okay. Like, it's solid. Let you return a creature from your yard to your hand. Future stuff is cheaper. I like all the words. I just don't know if it fits anywhere. But it's cool. I don't really have a problem with it. The Gitrog, Ravenous Ride. 3 colorless, black green for a 6/5 trample haste. Whenever this card deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a creature that saddled it this turn. If you do, you draw X cards, then put up to X land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tap where X is a sacrificed creature's power. So for 5 mana, you get a 6/5 trample haste, which is fine. And then, if you saddle it, and it only takes 1 to saddle it, you get to draw cards. And then if you do, you can put lands on the battlefield, which seems good. So, like, yeah, I'm okay with this. Like, I don't think the land, like previous versions of Gitrog things, the lands seem to be part of their own engine. Not so much here, but I mean, getting to draw extra cards isn't always nice. And it's on a solid creature. It's a frog horror mount, so don't know if those creature types matter all that much, but it's a cool card. All right, we can form a posse. X red white sorcery. Create X/1/1 mercenaries with tap. Oh, okay. So it just makes the mercenary tokens, however many you want to make. Yeah, we have so many things that can generate mana right now. We have stuff that likes having just a couple of small bodies. We have stuff that likes you having mercenaries. Yeah, this is going to get played somewhere. I don't know where somewhere is. I mean, even if you just play it to make like 4 bodies or something, there's a lot of ways those 4 bodies could be pretty difficult for the opponent. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say about this card other than it probably gets played. Annie Flash, the veteran. 3 colorless, red, green, white. 4/5 human rogue with flash. So you're paying 6 for a 4/5. So it needs to have a big upside here. When any flash enters a battlefield, if you cast it, return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So okay, so that's already cool. It's not even a creature, it's a permanent card in your graveyard. You get to put it back into play tapped. Whenever this becomes tapped, you exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. Okay. Yeah, so this has a lot going on. I like this. I like this. Human as well. So if you're playing Nigh humans or something, possibly upside to be able to get those creature back or keep playing stuff off the top of the library. Flash, which I like. So if your opponent were to sweep the board, like think about this. This is actually pretty sweet, right? It is 6, so I mean you're deeper in the weeds in the game. But your opponent does something to wipe the board. You flash this in. You now have a 4/5, but you get to get something out of the graveyard into play. So maybe you have an extra body, possibly 2 if it's one of the things that makes a creature. And then you get to attack and possibly play something out of the extra 2 cards, right? So you get to see 3 bonus cards or 3 cards the next turn, get your draw and 2 more, while you're attacking with 4+ power as well. This is a cool card. I don't know if you could play more than one of in some of the decks that would want it because it is 6 mana, but it's kind of a sweet card. I'm into it. All right, Free Strider Lookout. 2 colorless and a green for a 3/3. Fair. 3/4/3/3 human rogue with reach. Love that. Whenever you commit a crime, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them on the battlefield tap. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. This ability only triggers once each turn. This is mostly fine. There are some worlds where you could play like the 1 or 2 mana fight spells in green and take advantage of this. You're really just ramping up. I don't know if that's enough to make it worth it. But again, it's a human, so maybe it fits some of those. It's a rogue, so it might fit some outlaw stuff. But yeah, just kind of a cool design on a card. Colossal Rattleworm. 2 colorless. Green, worm. This has flash as long as you control a desert. We don't know how plentiful deserts are yet, I guess. It's a 6/5 with trample. This must have a downside then. Colorless and a green. Exile this card from a graveyard, search your library for a desert card, put it on the battlefield tap, then shuffle. There's no downside to this card. It's a 4 mana 6/5 with trample, which is already great, like beyond great for 4 mana. If you have a desert in play, then you can flash it in, which is even better. But then if it's in your graveyard, you just bonus can go search for a desert and put it onto the battlefield to just like ramp yourself up. And it doesn't even have to be done at sorcery speed. Like this card I don't even know why this card is what it is. I am so confused by this. 4 mana 6/5 with trample. Possible upside of being flash. And it helps you ramp up your mana. Yeah, this card's just good, y'all. Slickshot Show Off. Colorless and a red. 1/2. Bird Wizard. Flying. Haste. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Slickshot Show Off gets +2/+0 to end turn, and it has a plot of a colorless and a red. Yeah, this just fits those decks we were just talking about earlier, right? The Is It, play your extra spells, whatever. This just gets +2 for each one of those, which is already fantastic. And it's flying with haste, so you can play it late. You can plot it to set it aside. Yeah, there's a lot going on with this card. This is actually pretty sweet. Scorching Shot. It's a red sorcery. Deals 5 damage to target creature. Well, alright. I mean, that's solid, I guess. It's sorcery speed, but whatever. It's 2 mana to deal 5. Magda. Hadn't seen her in a minute. The Horde Master. Colorless and a red. 2/2. Dwarf Berserker. Whenever you commit a crime, create a tapped treasure token, which makes sense because her previous cards made treasure. It triggers once each turn. Sacrifice 3 treasure. Create a red 4/4 Scorpion Dragon with flying and haste. Activate only as a sorcery. Yeah, so again, if you have something that cares about treasure, and we already have several cards that do, this fits right in. You start sacking treasure and you make some Scorpion Dragons with haste. Seems good. We have Eartha Joe. I love that is one of the most country names so far in the set. Eartha Joe. Frontier Mentor. 2 colorless, red-white. 2/4 Core Advisor. So there's some core hanging out here as well. Whenever this card enters the battlefield, create a mercenary. We've gone over that. Whenever you activate an ability that targets a creature or player, copy that ability, and you can choose new targets for the copy. Wow. Targets a creature or player. It doesn't even have to be something you control or don't control, and you get to copy it. This has potential. You probably have to work for it, but it's another one of those ones where the upside is really, really high. but I dig it. It's kind of a small creature being a 2/4, but it has a big toughness. Could be fun to see what people could do with this. Okay, it looks like our first series of deserts come into play tapped, and when they enter the battlefield, they deal 1 damage to target opponent, which is interesting because we now have lands that deal damage, but also count as committing a crime. It'd be interesting to see how many of these people are willing to put into their decks. Because if you're playing something like Gruul, assuming there's a red-green one, because they're probably all friendly colors, like, that's actually makes sense, right? Because then you have lands that are also dealing damage. But I don't know that, say, a slow Grixis or control-style blue-black really wants this. They'd rather have, like, a Surveil land. But yeah, interesting. They're commons, too, so should be easy to play with. We are going to get the rest of the enemy fast lands, so if you played older forms of Magic, you probably played with these already. But Blooming Marsh, the red-white one, this is the green-black one, the green-blue one, like, all those will be back in the set, which is pretty cool, because we'll then have them all available for several months to build whatever the heck you want, especially in aggro piles. I stand corrected. It looks like there will be all 10 of the desert come into play deal of damage lands, so something to note. And of course, because it's a Western set, High Noon. Colorless and a white for an enchantment. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. You can pay 5 and sacrifice High Noon. It deals 5 damage to any target. That's kind of cool. I mean, if you want to keep your opponent from doing multiple things in a turn, slow them down a little bit, and then randomly deal 5 later to either finish them off or to, take out a big creature. Kind of cool. Could be a neat sideboard card, honestly. All right, that's it. Wow. Whew, that was a lot of cards. I'm going to try to get this edited down as tight as I can, but this might be a really long one because there was a pile of cards for the first couple of days worth of stuff. That being said, let me know so far, what are you most interested in? What are you going to try to build with? Because, man, there are a ton of options of things you could do already, and my brain's already going for a pile of different decks. But as always, if you want to just get some fun gameplay stuff, be sure to check out the next video because I have a lot to watch on this channel.